So welcome to It's a Death Sentence. Today we have Sophie Kirkwood with us. So welcome, Sophie.
Thank you.
And you've come today from Winston's Wish.
Yeah.
And Winston's Wish is a bereavement charity supporting young children and adults and families coping and living with grief in the UK. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's it, exactly.
Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I've... what do you want to know, I guess?
Everything.
What's your role within Winston's Wish?
So my role currently within Winston's Wish is to manage the on-demand service. So that includes our helpline, our live chat, our ask emails, and then some educational groups that we run as well for children and young people.
Okay, so we know that Winston's Wish is the first bereavement charity in the UK.
Children's bereavement charity,
okay.
yeah.
And has helped over 82,000 children in the UK alone. Tell us about the services you offer. So you've just told us a little bit about your role, but as a charity, what services are on offer?
Okay, so it's quite a broad range in that we offer something that we think is really unique, because actually what we offer in terms of the on-demand service, as I said, is like the helpline and the live chat and the ask emails, is that it's immediate bereavement support. So a lot of organisations, you have a waiting list and you have to wait, 6 months to be able to get support. Whereas we can offer that as and when children and young people want to talk to us. They don't have to wait, they can just log on and speak to someone. But then if they've got kind of more of the complex needs and actually they're getting a bit stuck in their grief, then we also offer structured bereavement support as well. So that's your traditional things like counselling, support sessions, where it's that one-to-one. And then we have group sessions that we run, and those are sort of based on age ranges. We've got ones for under sevens, we've got ones for sort of the middle age before they get to teenagers, and then we've got teenage groups.
So are you almost triaging what's coming in?
Yeah.
So you're the first port of call. So
Yeah.
you're often the first person that's... Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, how is that? Is that really hard?
It can be, yeah. So we call it like the front line of Winston's Wish, because we're kind of taking in people's really raw emotions when they're contacting us, because normally it's pretty rapidly after a death. And the good thing about being on the on-demand team itself is that we're providing that support to not only the children and young people that contact us, but to the wider adults that support them. So the schools, social workers, parents, grandparents, family, friends. We've had all sorts call us and say, how do I even go about explaining this to a child? How do I go about knowing that what they're experiencing is normal? Like, are they supposed to do this when they're grieving? And being able to provide that reassurance is kind of the key for what we do on demand as well. And then to be able to say, well, actually, from what you've said, it sounds like they might be struggling a little bit. Have they thought about contacting us? And then going from there. So it's a really holistic approach to trying to support children and young people.
Is it a 24-hour service that they offer?
No, it's not. So it depends. So we have an awful lot of information and resources that are available on the website. So we have a young people's website itself called Talk Grief. And then we've got the Winston's Wish website, which is for adults. So there's an awful lot of information that you can go on and pick up, blogs written by other young people as well. And that's obviously 24/7. But in terms of speaking to a bereavement support worker, then it's 8 till 8, Monday to Friday.
But they could get that help quite quickly if they were somebody who was really in need.
Yeah.
They could be, which, like you say, is amazing, because if you look at sort of waiting lists for counselling services generally, they can be extensive, and for some people almost out of reach altogether.
Absolutely, yeah. So being able to provide that and say, you don't have to wait, you can just pick up the phone or log onto the website and just start talking to someone is amazing. And be able to have someone hold that space.
Yeah.
And it's modern, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's accessible for them. They're all great at iPads and iPhones, and it's the perfect tech for them, isn't it?
Yeah, being a
contact
digital organisation has meant that we've been able to reach so many more young people that actually just don't want face to face.
Yes, I hear this over and over again. Actually, that they're more likely to reach out if if it can done on a digital platform of some sort.
Yeah,
because they're just not comfortable in that space.
And it's what they're used to. They talk to everyone online, don't they? And instead of, I think there is always that fear from a lot of adults maybe that are of an older generation that don't quite understand the tech, of going, well, what's that going to do for them? That's not going to help them. But actually meeting them where they're at is a really important part of being able to accept the support and then improve. Because if you're going, I know you're really uncomfortable about doing this, but we're going to go and sit down with this counsellor for an hour
and make
in
you
this
more
place,
uncomfortable
in this place that you've never been before,
Yeah.
with people that you don't know. You're going to be on your own. I'll come back in a bit.
Yeah. And also,
course
even
they're
if
gonna
there was
come
no
up.
grief involved, asking a young person to be in a room with an adult they don't know
Yeah.
and just have an open and frank conversation, they're just not going to want to do that.
Yeah, some children it just doesn't work, and that's not to say it's for everyone either. Some children really do benefit from face-to-face, in which case, hopefully there are services that they can access, but having the option to be able to say, yeah, if that's not for you, then come to us.
That's amazing.
So, Sophie, you know that our podcast, what we're trying to do here is dispel some of the myths and break some of the taboos and get people talking. But aside from you working for Winston's Wish, we want to know about your personal experiences as well. So can I ask you about your first experience of death?
Sure. Yeah. So I was quite a bit older when I had my first experience of death, in that it was 2017 and it was my granddad. So we knew he was quite unwell. He was quite old, but he was doing all right in himself. And he literally had just heart attack, fallen down. And that was it, never kind of got back up. And I was the first person that my gran called to tell me that he had died. And so then I had to break that news to my mum. And then I had to sort of rush. And
Was this her father, your
yeah,
mum's father?
Yeah. And funnily enough, I was at a funeral when I got the call to say that he had died. So it was all a bit like, this is surreal. How is this happening? And yeah, I ended up by sort of racing over there, and he was still on the floor, and paramedics had sort of stopped working on him and things. So it was my first experience of death.
It's quite graphic.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
Although I was quite a bit older, because, oh God, how old would I have been in 2017? Like early 20s. It was still like, oh,
Traumatic.
this is, like this is very real. And actually being able to see that from an adult's perspective, and then going, imagine if I was a child that had experienced something like that. And I was lucky in that I saw the aftermath of it rather than when it was happening. I wasn't there when he collapsed or anything like that. But imagine if I had have been. And I guess that kind of gives me a little bit of an insight to be like, I have no idea what children, young people have experienced when they go through
in
that.
2017, I'm just thinking back, how long have you worked for Winston's Wish?
I've worked there for about 2.5 years.
So did it influence you into that line of work, or were you already in that line of work?
I was kind of already there. So in 2017, I was at uni doing my counselling degree and hadn't really thought about where I wanted to go in terms of longevity, like my career. You can specialise in things like that. And I didn't really find my feet within the bereavement sector until I'd finished my uni course in 2019, and then ended up working at a local hospice. And it was one of those moments where it's like everything just kind of fit together when I saw the job advert. And I was like, well, this is it. It's perfect. I need to go and do this. And that's where it kind of grew, and found an absolute love for it and a passion for it.
I think that local hospice are in next, actually.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Who's coming?
Mel and
Heather.
I might stick around for that.
Okay, is that a gasp of joy, or?
Yeah, Heather's beautiful.
Well, we've been told, yeah. So how long were you with Primrose for?
Through 3 years.
Oh,
Yeah,
quite
from
some time.
2019
And
to
were you
2022.
counselling there then?
So my official title was Children and Young People's Group Support Worker. So my role there was to help with the groups more than anything. So kind of the pre-bereavement support groups for children, and then post-bereavement support. But I also did have a caseload of one-to-ones where I'd go into schools and sit with children and young people and help them to kind of talk about what's happened more than anything. And it was much more of a support role than a counselling role.
Okay.
So, Sophie, what's the first thing you think about when you think about death?
Oh. Nothingness, I think. And that's maybe quite controversial, because I think it all depends on belief systems. But for me, whenever someone says the word death, I just think of the end. Almost like that's the final bit, because we're all going to die at some point. Those are the two things that are absolutely certain in your life, is that you're going to be born and you're going to die. And so it feels like that's the end point. And for me, that's where my mind goes. Just, we don't know anything beyond that. So it's just sort of blank.
So do you have, other than blank, any notion at all, or any of your own beliefs about what happens when we die?
Yeah, I would say so. I think.
Yeah, end.
It stops. Yeah, no, I do. And that comes from being very open-minded. I think working in bereavement in general, you hear a lot of stories from people and sharing their experiences of what I believe that this person is around me because of this happening and this happening. I've had my own experiences of potentially being communicated with by people that have passed. So I'm not going to commit myself fully to saying, yes, this is exactly what I believe and this isn't. It's just very
Is there a
open
fence that you're sat right
wide.
on?
Massively.
Yeah, don't get splinters.
Yeah. And what about God? Do you believe in God?
I don't know.
Okay. So how do you personally cope with grief? I know you've had your own losses, and then also how do you cope with it professionally, and what's best for the youngsters? What's their best coping mechanism for grief?
Okay, so it's quite a wide range, that question, because I think for me personally, coping with death has always been to acknowledge the fact that it is hard, that there is no way to fix it, that grief that you're experiencing is just the incredible love that you had for that person that now has nowhere to be given, you know, because that person's not there anymore. So being able to accept that fact is probably the biggest thing for me. Being able to it's hard to put into words, I suppose, but just being okay with the sadness, which is the hardest bit, because everyone's like, oh, let's distract you, let's go do something else. Like, no, you just have to let it be, and you will get there kind of when you're
And that is
ready.
the hardest thing. And
Yeah,
in
100%.
an age of where we are distracted when we're happy,
Yep.
always trying to just distract ourselves, sitting with your own grief and being present for it is massively uncomfortable.
Hugely,
Nobody wants
yeah.
to do it.
No. Well, exactly.
And I think it's not just for that time the person has died that we're kind of going, oh, well, you know, you get your 6 months or 12 months. Actually, you know, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15 years later, it'll still be hard hitting and you'll still have your moments, and you've still got to learn to sit and be okay with it.
It's lifelong. You don't get a point where you go, okay, I'm done grieving now, because it changes throughout your entire life, you know. And going back to the question that you said about, you know, what's the coping strategy for young people, in that it depends on where they're at. They're going to be, if they're younger, let's say, then actually it's going to be about explaining what death is. What does that mean? When they get older, it might be about, okay, well, this person's not going to be here for my GCSE results, for me going to uni, for me getting married. Then when they're older, it's, you know, they're not going to see me having children. So no matter what stage they're at, the coping might look slightly different, and it's so individual. There is no one size fits all for any of this. And that's why it's important to be able to sit with it and go, okay, so what does help?
Yeah. I heard somebody today, actually, I was listening to something this morning where a guy was explaining his grief like a stone in his pocket, and saying that it's always like, you know, it's always there, and it's heavy to start with, and the stronger you get, like as time goes on, that the stone doesn't get any lighter, but you get stronger, but it's still always present. So, you know, it's a never-ending cycle, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's very similar to what we describe as growing with grief at Winston's Wish, but it's Tonkin's theory, which is that your grief is all-consuming when it first happens, but your grief doesn't get smaller over time. It stays the same size, but your life gets bigger. You experience more, and therefore
I think I've seen a
have more.
diagram of this. Yeah.
And it just, I think it stops you from thinking that actually you're missing something of that person by having the grief get smaller. Like, you know, you still want them to be part of your life, and you still want them to be present, even if they have died. So being able to hold on to that grief and know that it's still the same size, but you're able to deal with more stuff around it, I think is really important and helps a lot of people.
Yeah.
So are you spiritual? I know you sort of touched on it there, and I wondered if you'd talk to us about that and talk to us about your experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to. It's nothing crazy, but I do have... So in my house at the moment, I've got a grandfather clock on my wall, and that was something that my grandfather had in his childhood home. And when my granddad was growing up, it was during World War II. So he was born in 1930. So he was sort of old enough to understand what was going on by the time it got to, 1939. And he had an older brother, George, who was in the RAF, and he was flying officer. And it was 1943, and this grandfather clock was sat on the wall, as it always had been, an 8-day wind-up clock. So every 8th day, you'd wind it up, it'd go for another 8 days. And they'd, for some reason, noticed that at the same time each day, this clock on their wall just kept stopping. It was the same time every day for a week straight, and then it went back to normal. And they didn't think anything of it. They just thought, oh, it's something's going on with the mechanisms, whatever. And then a few weeks later, they received a telegram to say that George was missing in action and presumed dead. So that's when my great-grandmother, my granddad's mum, had said, well, that's the time that George died then. And I think she took a lot of comfort from that. And that was kind of the story that then played out throughout his life. He kept the grandfather clock.
We hear so much about clocks, don't we?
Clocks and lights, yeah. And then when he got married, I think it was like their 40th wedding anniversary or something, there was a book called Bummer Command, and my gran had bought it for him as their present. And I'm not even joking when I say he opened it up, and at the first page, he found George Such, his flying number, and then the time that they lost contact with the aircraft, which was the same time that the clock had stopped. And it gets weirder, though, because that was something that was his pride and joy. Like, he absolutely loved that clock. And because I grew up hearing that story, I was like, I want that clock. So it's now on my wall. But the day he died, the clock stopped, and it's never worked since. We can't get it to go. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
very
You said clocks and lights then?
Yes. Yeah.
Lights, tell me about that.
Lights flickering, always. Those always seem to be the things. And when my dad had died, I went to see him in the Chapel of Rest, and the light started to flicker in there. And the person was in there with me, and she basically said, "Oh, that's weird. That's never happened before." Which, who knows? It could be that the light bulb was going, but
I've heard that before as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if we're all energy, then electricity's
Yeah,
energy. It makes
exactly.
sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Have you ever had any experiences with a medium or a
couple.
spiritualist?
Yeah, a couple. One more recently, actually, a couple of weeks ago, I went to see one with my sisters, as I'm one of 4 sisters, but I had 2 of them with me, and they came to this medium, and we didn't really have any expectations of it, and to be honest, relatively disappointing. Went in there with open minds, as I say, that you're supposed to do, and we didn't really get to touch on anything that was like, oh, that's definitely Grandad, or that's definitely Dad. And I've had one previously years ago before I even had my daughter, and it was more of a kind of a psychic at that point, I suppose. She was saying that she was having my dad coming through and was talking to him, but then gave me all of this information about my future, which was incredibly wrong.
I thought you were so incredibly accurate, and we were like on the edge of our seats, ready, poised and ready.
Incredibly wrong.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I've had a couple of similar instances with my sister and I going and just coming out and just being almost in hysterics because it was that bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't just inaccurate, it was wildly inaccurate.
Yeah.
But almost funny.
I think that's it. And I think that that's not even been to the point of being able to stop me from believing in it either.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Which
think
is
we
mad,
keep an
isn't
open
it?
mind, don't we?
Yeah, I would still have any opportunity that someone said, do you want to sit with this medium? I'd be like, yeah, go on then. I want someone to change my mind and to go, I've absolutely communicated with your dad or your granddad.
And would you want a message then? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you'd find it comforting.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Gav's still here. Maybe we should speak to him. So this is it all sounds like a bit of a doomy question, but if it all to end tomorrow, is there anything that you would have done? Is there anything that you could do with your life that you've not done? Is there anything you'd really feel you've missed out on?
Do you know what? Probably not.
Oh,
lovely.
lovely.
I know. And it's a really boring answer because I haven't done a lot with my life either, but kind of that's the way I like it.
But are you happy? You're a happy person and content.
Yeah, I am. I feel like I found my calling in my job. I really love going to work. There is never a day when I wake up and think, God, I wish I didn't have to do this today.
Which is interesting because you work in bereavement.
I know.
So there must, for a lot of people, and my sister works in bereavement, and she, I think you must get to a point with any job where you think, do you know what, I just don't fancy it today.
Yeah.
But, I just don't live with you. Do you fancy another autopsy today, Kerry?
I think I'll give it a miss.
She's all right.
Yeah.
But to be able to say, A, that you love your job and that, that's your calling.
Yeah.
What a lovely position to be in.
Yeah, I think so.
And how wonderful for the people coming into your care.
Hopefully it means that I do them justice as well and being able to provide a service that they're deserving of. But I am incredibly lucky because I'm still so young as well. I think I'm only 29, and being able to find what I love to do from age 24 onwards is pretty good going.
That's amazing.
It really
is. A lot of people
Good
don't
on
know
you.
what they want to do when they're 40.
Yeah. And that was my biggest fear in life, is like waking up in the morning and dreading work, having that Sunday feeling.
Yeah.
So not having that, and actually looking forward to going to work sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I love my job, so I get it. I do get it.
Like being able to have a break as well from having a toddler. It's kind of quite nice.
Yeah.
Remembering who you are and not just mummy. Yeah.
I am an adult.
running
with my own
around
thoughts.
constantly.
Yeah. I think maybe I'd want to have travelled more, but that's, I think, probably standard. But
Yeah, everybody sort of goes to travel. Have you thought about your own funeral?
yeah.
Have you got plans? What would you
plan the whole
like?
thing.
Oh, go on then, tell us.
Yeah. So I am very much a believer in the funeral is for the people that are left behind, not the person that has died. So I don't have very strict rules on what I want it to look like. I say as long as whoever, so, you know, whether it be my partner, my parents, if God forbid I die before they do, then they've got free reign to make it look however they want to look. I was just like, I don't want a religious one. Don't want a religious ceremony. That's one of the only stipulations. And I kind of want it to be more of a memorial service because, and this might be something new that people don't talk about very often, but I don't like the idea of being buried and I don't like the idea of being cremated.
Very interesting.
So I did a little bit of research a few years ago and have settled on the fact that I would like a sea burial. So there are, I think there's
Talk
4.
us through that.
Yeah, it's I think a little bit more expensive. There's 4 spots in the UK. I think majority of them are off the coast of Scotland where you can legally do a sea burial. But essentially wrap you in a cloth that just dissolves, drop you overboard, and that's it.
See ya.
Yeah. And I love it. I love the ocean. I've always loved water.
I wonder why there's these particular spots. Is it where you're less likely to be washed up?
I think it's to do with naval bases.
Interesting.
From what I read, don't quote me on that, but I'm sure it was something to do with naval bases and like having the facilities to be able to do that in those areas. But yeah, I used to live by the sea, and so it's always really calming for me, and I've just always sort of felt at peace. So I was like, well, that's the ultimate peace.
Because the idea of burial and cremation both not for you.
No.
I understand the burial thing. Mm-hmm. I do understand that. I don't think I'm bothered at all by the cremation. In fact, I much prefer that to burial because I just think get it done and dusted, so to speak.
I've never even considered a sea burial. I've never even
it's very interesting.
considered it. But yeah, it's a great choice.
Yeah.
So coming back to your career, how do you think it's? We want to be talking openly about death. How do you think it should be approached with children and younger people?
Be honest. Be honest with them in an age-appropriate way. That's the biggest thing that I would say, because this is kind of twofold in that children listen, they pick up on everything, they know more than you think they know, and also there is always the opportunity for them to learn what's happened elsewhere, other people talking, overhearing conversations, the internet. They have access to these things, and if there is a chance that they can find out more information or the truth, then it needs to be given to them by people that they trust, you know, their parents, carers, grandparents.
I have a question for you, it's from a personal point of view, if you don't mind. So I've got, you know, my children, and it was Mother's Day recently, so we took them to the crematorium with a plaque for my mum, and that evening I had them both in tears at different points saying, I miss Nanny Julie. Aww. And I had to explain to them they've never met Nanny Julie. Nanny Julie died the year before my son was born. So I found that obviously it's late at night and you're really tired and you've got 2 young kids, but I found that I had to find a way to make this, I don't know, okay for them and be okay with the fact that they are, you know, at 7 and 8 years old. Is that a type of grief for something they've never known? Is it an understanding of do they understand it more than I think? How you know, how is... I'm of the opinion, obviously doing this podcast, that I try and be as honest as I can be. Yep. And I'm also not religious, so I try and say we go back to the earth. And so Nanny Julie went back to the earth, and we can come back in some ways as part of nature. And then, you know, sooner or later, when it's your own situation, your own children or whatever, you find yourself just going, oh, God, I don't know, give up, really.
Yeah.
What would be your advice there?
So there was something really key in what you said in all of that, and that's that you want to make it okay for them. It's not okay, though, is it? Because that person was really important to you, and she has died. You are going to have feelings around that. You are going to experience grief on that day. And your children are part of you. they're going to be experiencing your grief through you. So it's not unexpected that they would kind of start to have those sort of emotions. And maybe it is kind of helping them to understand, well, what actually is that? You know, is it that they miss her, or is it something else that they wish that they'd got to meet her? Something along those lines, because the vocabulary at that age is limited, obviously, because they're so little. In terms of understanding at that age, they understand an awful lot. They're sort of, at that point, they understand more about the finality of death as well. In the, as you've said, you know, she's gone back to the earth and we're not going to get to see her again. Things like that they will get. It might just be more about how people die and how that happens. How do they get ill? The physicalities of it, actually, like what happens inside their body. Some morbid curiosities might start coming out.
I think that
as
they
well.
do, when they hear somebody's poorly, they want to know what type of poorly.
Yes.
Is it hospital poorly?
Yeah.
Is it death poorly, or is it a cold poorly?
Yeah, yeah, because that's how they're figuring out the world. And for them, already knowing how, I guess, death has probably impacted you and seeing how your grief has manifested over the years that they've been alive, being able to see, you know, well, what does that mean for other people? When does grief happen? When does it start? You know, there's so many questions that for us as adults, we kind of might take for granted and thinking, well, of course we know the answer to that because we've experienced it before. But it's a blank slate for children. So it could just be in that moment that they're just figuring it out. They're trying to understand it themselves and being able to say, you know what, yeah, I'm really sad about that and I really miss her today.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they saw me cry, my sister cry, and even my dad shed a tear. And I don't want to ever hide that from them. I want to bring them up in the most open way possible. And this is, I imagine, the messages you must be conveying day in and day
Absolutely.
out. But it's easier said than done, isn't it? You know, without you've got a child the same age, and where do you start with that? It's so,
Smart,
you know, because there's the adult in you, the parent in you that desperately wants to, you know, it's okay, don't worry about it, they go to heaven.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that, so I'm not about to pontificate that upon my children. I'm just
Yeah.
not going to do that.
Yeah.
But then there are times that I can go so far with it, and then I find, oh, I actually don't have the answer here. Or they say something so poignant to me. You know, I said to you, Carrie, the one day, didn't I? You know, Mummy, why can't you get a new mummy?
Yeah.
Why can't you get a new
So
mummy?
matter of
Yeah.
fact.
Yeah.
And, you know, and
Yeah.
it's absolutely horrendous because what she's saying is really matter of fact, but it's actually accurate because she's, you know, why can't I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think, well, I don't know, is there anyone out there who's willing? I'm looking for somebody around 70-ish. But yeah, it's really, really difficult. And especially when there's two of them sort of going at you at the
Yeah.
same time. So
Yeah.
you must deal with siblings as well who've lost.
Yes. Yeah. And it's all kinds of deaths as well. So it could be that they've lost grandparents, parents, siblings themselves. And it's all kind of slightly different. You know, their grief is different because they're going to experience life slightly differently depending on who they've lost. But yeah, siblings, they'll often, I think this is what freaks out a lot of parents as well, is that you can have two siblings that grieve completely differently. And it can be really unnerving thinking, oh, this one's talking about it all the time. And, you know, they've got pictures up and they've got, you know, they're being able to express their emotions, they're crying, whatever. And then you've got one that's just really quiet and getting on with it. And a lot of the time people focus on the one that is talking about it and saying, you know, oh, I need to make them feel better. You know, they're telling me they're sad all the time. How do I fix it? And I'm going, what about the one that's not saying anything? That's the one that you should really turn your attention to, because you have to express it. That's the whole point of the grief. If you hold it in, we call it fizzy feelings, where you kind of like bottle it up and then you shake the bottle, it's going to burst, you know. So it's just about waiting for that to happen. So being able to offer up that space to all children and say, do you want to talk about it? How are you feeling? This is how I feel about it. What do you think of that? Actually starting those really simple conversations just gives them a permission to be able to go, oh, okay, I can feel sad. It's okay to do that.
That's what they're looking for sometimes, isn't it? You know, am
Yeah.
I allowed to talk about this?
Yeah.
Because you're sad, so am
Yeah.
I allowed to be sad too?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I always say to parents is that they're going to learn to grieve by watching you. So however you want your child to grieve, you have to do that yourself.
So we'll go back to that wailing then.
Yeah,
We're
keening.
seeing some cultures just wail. I
Yes.
think we should bring that in.
Yeah. But there are cultures that sleep on the graves, you know.
Yeah.
And it depends on, you know, I've done quite a lot of research, I suppose, into different cultures and how they respond to death, because, yes, we're in the UK, but we have such a lot of different ethnicities and backgrounds and cultures that working for an organisation that is for the whole of the UK. We get all sorts that come through, and I want to be able to say, oh, okay, that's what you believe, that's how you deal with your grief, and that's okay. Without then putting my own slant on it by saying, you know, oh, okay, well, have you tried doing this instead? And actually that's a little bit, what's the word? Offensive to them.
Yeah, you have to be diverse, don't you?
You
with
do,
these things? Yeah.
massively, yeah. And, you know, never assume is a big part of that as well.
Can you tell us about growing up grieving? And that's something that you've got, one of your initiatives, isn't it?
Yeah,
Can you
so
tell us about that?
growing up grieving, well, I mean, it's about being able to ensure that no child grieves alone. It's a really isolating experience, right? So having, and I don't know if you know anyone that's older that's experienced a death when they were a child, but quite often it was we just won't talk about it then. We'll pretend that person didn't exist. And now there is a whole host of people who are adults who are really struggling with the fact that no one spoke about Mum after she died. That was it. She died and then I never heard anything about it again. We're not going to let that happen for this generation. You know, they deserve to have their voices heard as well. You know, we have a youth team at Winston's Wish and a youth advisory board where we say we're not just being, you know, led by young people in, you know, saying, so what do you want? What do you need? Actually letting them guide us. They're writing the policies, they're writing all of the information that then we're using in training to be able to inform schools and other professionals to say, this is what I needed as a grieving child. And then that's how you get in there, that's how you support, you know, and schools are a big part of that. A child spends so much time within a school in their early life. And I don't know about the children, the school that your children go to, but I would encourage you to look at the school and see whether they have a bereavement policy in place, because it's something that's not enforced. They don't have to. But when one child in every single class has lost a parent and they don't have a bereavement policy, I find that mad.
We've had a bereavement or two within school. I'm going to be very cautious about how I go about this, but a school is a small school and dealt with it very well.
Yeah.
Very, very well.
Yeah.
And made it palatable for that. The different age groups, I imagine they did it in different, but I know that they did talk to the children about what had gone
That's amazing.
and about how to treat the child.
Yes.
The two children that were, you know, and it is important. So my two came home talking about it. They were very
Great.
little.
Yes. And that shows an example of a school that's done it right. But there are so many that don't
Get it wrong. Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So this is our last question.
Yeah. That went quick.
It really did. If you could find out when you were going to die, would you want to know?
No.
I love it.
Lovely,
Just
simple, to
don't
the
even
point.
think about it. Yeah.
No, don't tell me. Just let it happen. I think I would spend my life over planning, being like I need to squeeze so much in that it would make me unhappy. Like I'm happy as I am. And when I die, if that's tomorrow or if that's in 50 years' time, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's nice. It's really nice to hear as well. No, I'm good. I'm fine, thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it's been lovely to meet you, Sophie, and lovely to talk to you. And it's fascinating hearing, you know, from your perspective.
If anybody wants to get in touch with Winston's Wish, how would they go about that? Other than the obvious Googling of Winston's Wish.
Yeah, obvious Google of Winston's Wish will give you all the information. No, so our help and support line number, which is 08088 020 021. If you do go onto our website, there is a live chat on there as well. So there's winstonswish.org or talkgrief.org, bottom right-hand corner. Nice little button that you can click and answer a few questions and you'll be able to speak to us, or you can email us at ask@winstonswish.org.
Wonderful. Sophie, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you
Really
for having
appreciate
me.
it. Thank you, Winston's Wish.
Santa